Hello everyone, and welcome to another Star Trek Online video. And today it's about the legendary Dhelan, and I'm probably mispronouncing it because I'll be honest, I have no idea how to pronounce this ship. However, it's not the important part here. So let's have a look at this beauty. Honestly, when I first saw screenshots of this ship, I was, let's just say, not very enthusiastic. But seeing the model in-game has changed my mind on this. I think this is not a bad looking ship. Now the decals here on the bottom, right now they are fixed, but I've heard that they're gonna update the skin and give an option to remove them. Personally, I like them, so there is that, but your mileage may differ. Now besides the new skin, you of course have the old models of this ship, so if you prefer those, you can go with those. They are not the most up-to-date models, let's put it like this. But, you know, if this is more your style, you can go for it. And as always, you can, like, mix and match if you want to. And create a unique-looking ship that fits your tastes. However, I wanna go back to the new model, and I think you can make this thing look relatively pretty. So I'm not the biggest fan of the hull material here. I do like it's down there. What I personally really like is the run there. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think this one looks pretty good, especially once you throw some paint on it. But first, let's quickly go over all the other hull materials. There is the upgrade. There is the Tulva, Varro, Scimitar, Romulan Veteran. I mean, Romulan Veteran could you like? I feel like this hull material could use an up. General, all the veteran materials, I feel like they could do a bit of an update to them. I don't mind the white here, but I feel like the textures aren't the highest quality. Moving on, we have Type 4, Type 3, Type 2 brown, Type 2, Type 1. Yeah, that looks a bit outdated, right? Type 0. Now that's a rather clean white look. You could probably make something with that. Especially keep in mind, right, you could like throw sort of a pattern on this. Probably make this look rather nice. What if we throw like an Orion pattern on it? Yeah, you know, actually that looks pretty decent if this is like your kinda look. Romulan Type 0, definitely something to consider. Okay, let's continue here. We have Mirror Type 1. Also not the worst look. I like the sort of highlights here. But as you can see, right, with certain materials, it looks quite different. And of course, you still have the decals. You will be able to remove them at some point in the future. For now, they are here, but as I said, I don't mind them. Then we have Fleet. Yeah, that's also a bit outdated. We have Freeman, Type 2 and Type 1. I don't think Freeman Type 1 is the best on this ship. And we have the runner there that I don't know how to pronounce. The Falchion, the Tetra and the Deridex. Now, I want to go back to this because what I think here is right. So I'm gonna pick like black for both colors here. And then you throw on a pattern like this, right? Because it makes those areas here like really dark. And it allows those yellow lights here to shine through. And I think that's a very good look. Honestly, if I had to decide, it would either be another or the Type 0. I think the Type 0 is also a pretty decent look. It's a bit less sort of Romulan, or more like a bit of old school Romulan there. especially with the decals down here. But not a bad look. But I think I'm going to stick with this nice green Romulan. And honestly, not a bad looking ship, although your mileage may vary. Well, let's head into space. And now we are into space. So this is where I will present you my own creation of a build that's a lot of fun, and honestly, it's a pretty strong build, right? It's not gonna top any charts, but still I can highly recommend you try out something like this because it works relatively well, assuming you have the pieces to put it together. Now, you could run this just like any other escort with dual heavy cannons, and it would do very well. It's a pilot and intel ship, not a bad combination at all. You've got, I guess we could quickly look at this seating here. So you do have your engineer with intel. You do have your commander with tactical pilots, then you have another lieutenant pilot, and you have enough universal seating to get your gravity well on there. So, yeah, pretty good build overall. But let's go back to what I've done here. I have 4 torpedoes in the front and the dual beam bank from the Reputation, allowing me to run the 3-piece here. This is a somewhat torpedo-focused build with energy weapons sprinkled on top and a bit of science. And it works really well. So the idea behind this is there is the covered warhead module from the Terran Eagle. And this sets shared torpedo recharge to 0.5 seconds. Now, the conventional wisdom has been that a torpedo build needs command for concentrate firepower. However, that's not really the case anymore these days. Because with the covered warhead module, you can essentially fire a torpedo every half seconds. Now, concentrate firepower has a chance to reset your torpedo cooldowns and give you a free high yield, essentially, right? But there are downsides to concentrate firepower. Like, you mark a target and then you have to attack the target. And somebody else in your team could get the concentrate firepower, which, I mean, is not bad for the team as a whole, but, you know, it's not making you more effective. But the thing is, you need a target that is alive long enough, right? If you mark a small ship with concentrate firepower and it immediately explodes, it didn't really do much. It's mostly to take down big targets, and taking down big targets isn't really a problem with this build. But the main point is, with a 0.5 second torpedo recharge, you don't need to reset any torpedo cooldown. Now, this is just the shared cooldown, mind you. This is where the duty officers come in. Now, I'm just running 3 projectile officers. There is a lockbox starship trait that helps reduce torpedo recharge. I don't have that, but if you have that, you don't need 3 projectile officers. But essentially, every time you fire a torpedo, there's a 20% chance to improve the recharge by 5 seconds. I run 3 of those, and with the 4 torpedoes, this pretty much guarantees just a steady stream of torpedoes, right? So with the console and those 3 officers, it's just the constant straight line of torpedoes at the enemies, unless the game glitches out or something and weapons refuse to fire. But, you know, this just works really well, and you don't need any torpedo reset cooldown, right? I should also point out that the covered warhead module requires you to have pilot maneuvers, so this only works on pilot ships. But you don't need the secondary command. The secondary intel here is not bad, actually, because, you know, intel has some interesting abilities. I'm not using that much intel, just ionic turbulence, but it's another uncon trigger, and it debuffs resistances, so that's nice. You could go with more intel here if you wanted to, if you aren't that much into engineering. Anyway, moving on. Now, I've also said that concentrate firepower would give you free high yields, so you don't have that. However, you know what also gives free high yields? The fleet power network array. you might notice that every 3 seconds there's 60% chance to apply one of the following, which includes, torpedo high yield 1. So trust me, with this console you're getting quite a few high yields, and you will see that because I'm running the isolytic tear trait, so my high yields create isolytic tears, and you will see there will be quite a few of them, despite me just having the one high yield here. But a bit more about it later. So I'm running the usual torpedo build torpedoes with the biomolecular photon torpedo, the neutronic, the Delphic, dark matter quantum, and then the beam bank here for the set bonus. Now you could run a maelstrom here, you could run this more like classic torpedo build, that would work fine as well. I'm using a little bit more of energy hybrid because I think it looks cool and it works really well. So 3 of those torpedoes are from the Reputation, the 4th is a low-buy torpedo. You could also, if you don't have the low-buy for the Delphic, you could use the crafted torpedo, for example, the particle emission or however it's called. Generally, you could probably run also the, gravimetric torpedo from, I forgot which Reputation. But, if you don't have the Delphic, you could swap this out if you wanted for something else. It would still work. The Delphic is just a pretty neat torpedo. It is one of those that I think has a special interaction with high yield. Okay, moving on. So I'm running 2 pieces of the Revolutionary set, which is more of a science set, but there is some science damage in there, and I just like them. I have them on an account-wide unlock, so I put the 2 pieces on a lot of my ships together with the 2 pieces of the Discover Reputation set for the high regeneration. I always like 2-piece Discovery for the regeneration, and then like the other things optional. You could run like a fleet Singularity Core, a fleet deflector. You could try to look for another set that has a 2-piece bonus that you like. You could run all 4 Discovery. There are lots of options here. Now let's look at the aft weapons. I'm running the Parvan Omni. Now this is a event gear from last year, and it's just a very strong Omni. And you can already see where a little bit of the energy hybrid comes in, while I'm still running like 4 torpedoes and I'll do a lot of damage with those 4. Nothing stops me from doing a little bit of energy damage as well, right? Because I can't maintain high weapons power and high aux power at the same time with my emergency powers. And I'm not really sacrificing much, because I don't really need the shield power, and this ship is fast and maneuverable enough that they don't need the engine power. So I can really just say, like, you know what? Torpedoes might not need weapon power, but I don't really need the power elsewhere all that importantly. So why not still put it in weapon power and get some damage out of my dual beam bank and out of my Parvan Omni? And since I'm running the fleet network for 3 high yields, the haste is also pretty nice, right? So the energy weapons are a little bit of an afterthought, but because some parts of my gear, like the 3 high yields here, also like help my energy weapons, might as well give them the power to do damage. Then I have the cutting beam here, which is absolutely not required, but I mean, it does kinetic damage in a build that focuses a lot on kinetic damage, so why not? Since I already have other energy weapons, you could just throw another beam array here if you wanted to, an Omni beam, or a turret, or anything, like if you have something with a specific proc. A traditional torpedo boat would have mines in the back, but I'm not really running anything to buff mines. However, with the fleet network array, those will actually provide some reasonable damage and the high power. Now for the experimental weapon, I'm using the Hexa cannons, because it's more or less the strongest experimental weapon, or one of them in the game. And why not? Once again, me running high weapon power will benefit this weapon. So I have a bit of energy weapons. I have my torpedoes here in the front. And it all just comes together beautifully, trust me. You will see that then in the combat demonstration. Now for the consoles. I'm running just a bunch of universal consoles. You could swap this out. You could run like Spire consoles for your torpedoes. Definitely a version of this could just run a lot more well, torpedo damage. I do run Lorcas for the 3 piece, which gives some free torpedoes, and I mean generally it's a good console to have with the crit chance. The assimilated module also gives just crit chance and severity. Don't care that much, I suppose, about the 2 piece here. This build has very little power drain because there's so few energy weapons, meaning the proc for less power drain is also not that important. But the stats on it are good. Also, both of those consoles gives weapon power, and being a warbird, I have less overall power to go with, and I'm trying to power auxiliary and weapons at the same time. But as I've said, that works out very well together with like the emergency powers. But let's start here at the top. I'm running a Swarmer Matrix now. I don't really have like targetable torpedoes, which would really profit from that buff. If you'd be running a different kind of torpedo with more like targetable high yields or so on, that would be more interesting. It still gives you 50 projectile weapon training, which translates to like 25% category 1 torpedo damage. And the drones do a little bit of damage, so they aren't completely useless, but that could easily be replaced. I had this lying around, so I've used it, but you could replace that, for example, with a Spire console or another universal console you like. Proton Eruptor is a science console, and as I've said, this build does a little bit of science in there. It's just a strong console to have. It's from a Senstor ship, so an account-wide unlock, and definitely a fun console. If you have it, why not use it? The network array I've already covered, 3 high yields, and I mean the exotic particle generator buff is welcome, I guess. Mostly this is for 3 high yields and also helps the energy weapons. The DPRM is, well, I mean, if you don't have that, you don't need it, but it's obviously a nice console to help you survive. I'm also using the adaptive emergency systems here. Another nice console, it's from the flagship set. Gives you essentially some resistance and some damage. Like, this is obviously not the most tanky ship, but you do a lot of damage, so a lot of enemies wanna target you. It's nice to have something to explode a bit less. I'm running the custom power matrix, which, you know, the buffs will help my weapons. So more crit chance, crit severity, and the haste will of course help my energy weapons there. I've got the teleport console for universal cooldowns. I've got the covered module, which simply exists for the passive, for the shared cooldown. Then I have the Guardian console. The energy weapon damage buff isn't that... Like, this console is more defensive on this ship. You notice the 75% shield resistance. More exotic and energy damage is welcome, but it would be more helpful if it were torpedo damage, right? Because the torpedoes are still, you know, a very significant chunk of my damage. This is a torpedo build after all. Well, it's a hybrid build. Cranium Chronophage, something I put on every ship I have because it's just cheap and too good not to use. And then I have the Micron Quanti Torpedo Phalanx. This is from the same ship as the Hexa cannons, and it's a very good console on any ship, but it's especially a good console on a torpedo ship because, you know, it reduces kinetic damage resist ratings with its hits. So it's obviously very nice to have. So let's hop over to traits. Now, when it comes to traits, there would definitely be some better traits than what I'm running right now, but you know, this is working fine for me. Now, when it comes to personal space traits, importantly, I obviously run Boimler and unconventional systems. Those are the true crucial ones. I need unconventional systems for the console recharge, and I need Boimler for the bridge officer recharge. I also have things like a Good Day to Die, which helps go down fighting, be usable even on max health. I have something like Fireball Escape, because it helps me not explode close to ship explosions. I am running Particle Manipulator here, although this isn't really that set up as a science ship, but there is enough sciencey stuff on here with, I feel like I get a reasonable amount of damage from the Proton Eruption and the Cranium Chronophage, and I believe it might also help the subspatial warheads, although I'm not entirely sure if that counts as science. It says physical damage and not kinetic, and physical is usually sort of the more sciencey kind of. So I don't know, I mean, you could obviously run something. This is a trait that you just get from leveling science, right? Now let's go to the starship traits. So I've already touched on subspatial warheads. This trait comes from a low-buy ship. You can also buy that in the exchange for around 200 million usually. And it creates isolytic tears from high yields. It's why I'm running high yield. Right? There are also like 2 torpedoes that get additional buffs from high yield. You could just run this with spreads instead. If you don't have this trait, you could consider going more torpedo spread focus. But this works very well for me, and especially with like the additional high yields from the fleet network. It's just very nice. I'm running the improved gravity well, mostly because I like gravity well. It allows me to keep it constantly up, and this is more like a trait that I have fun with, and not necessarily crucial in any way. I'm also running the angle on the bow. It's the trait from the... what's it called? The Achilles. The same ship that has the hexacannons on it. So I'm using like the hexacannons, the console, and the trait from this ship, because why not? I don't really have that many great torpedo traits on like counter and unlock, I think. But, you know, it gives more torpedo damage and some shield pen. I do have the Ruin of Our Enemies, which I put on basically every build, because I have it as an account with unlock. Now I'm running She's a Predator, which I don't really have the perfect bridge officer layout for that, because you see it's only a 15-second uptime. You could extend that if you had another bridge officer with like there is the... I forgot how the trait was called. Was it Infiltrator? And you need different levels of the trait, like Superior Infiltrator, Normal Infiltrator, and so on, and they stack. But I only have the Superior one, which means I only get the bonus for like 15 seconds. As I said, my traits are not perfect for this, and this is definitely just there, of course it works. But none of this is like really crucial, right? I am running Ship of the Line, Crit Severity. Now this is a more optimized one, I suppose. By cycling 2 emergency powers, I essentially can keep this up all the time on its maximum stacks, which is 50% crit severity. Who doesn't want to have 50% more crit severity? And I'm running the Particle Fluctuation Analysis, a trait that I tend to put on most of my ships now from the bundle. Because, you know, I just like buffing crit and crit severity. I'm not gonna keep 10 stacks up all the time myself, but I don't care. I keep enough stacks that I feel like it's worth it, and it's not just helping me, it's helping my team as well. I'm sure the stacks decay again and I build them up again. Well, you see, this is a trait that just can... It's really powerful if you actually maintain all stacks all the time. But even if you don't, if you have enough consoles, right? If you fire off 6 consoles, you got 6% crit chance, 60% severity for 10 seconds. And if you fire up the buff consoles first, right? If I go through 4 buff consoles, that would be 4 stacks, then I could teleport, that would be 5 stacks, and then if I fire my damage consoles, I would fire all 3 of them with 5 stacks. Now there isn't like a perfect rotation or so going on there, so how many stacks I have when I fire something will vary throughout the battle. But you are buffing, you know, by firing like your buffs first and then the others, you're essentially already buffing those consoles. Getting a lot of worth out of that, and you fire your weapons all the time, which will get buffed whenever there is an uptime of stacks. If you feel like, you know, if the maximum stacks you reach are 8, let's say, and you keep those 8 stacks up for, I don't know, half of the time, that would still be like 4% crit chance and 4% severity on average. So when you're looking at a trait like this, you can't just look like... It's not an all or nothing. It's not like if you never reach 10 stacks, you're missing out or something. And I like the team buff. Yeah, so what about stations? Well, station-wise, as I've said, I'm running 2 emergency powers. I run emergency power to auxiliary 3, because as you see, my auxiliary is a bit low, because warbirds don't have that much power. So I'm sitting at well, my base weapon power is 95. That's enough to reach the 125 here. And I'm actually sitting at 75, even with only setting a power to 35. I have specced skill-wise into warp coefficiency. Definitely something I can recommend, right? With a power setup like this, warp coefficiency is going to come in handy. But, you know, if I press my emergency auxiliary, we are up at 114 auxiliary. Of course, if I were running my toggles, I would now be only at 105 auxiliary. But, you know, that's pretty decent. I can certainly work with that. And with the red matter capacitor and proto matter capacitor, I'll occasionally have a little bit more there. So, yeah. Working pretty well there. So I was talking about the stations, right? I have a beta 3 because I don't need another attack skill there, so I'm having a lot of debuff on this build. And obviously high yield 3. I have clean getaway, which is an uncon trigger. I have chemosite, which works really well with a torpedo build. I have a fire at will too, which essentially buffs the beams that I have, right? The fire at will is mostly for the power one and the dual beam bank. As we all know, the power one mostly lives off its proc, and if you just hit a lot of things with high haste and so with the power one, it will definitely be noticeable. Of course, like the dual beam bank also profits from the fire at will. Now, what you could, for example, run here is you could run a Entwined Tactical Matrices for the spread, and you could run a fire at will 1 and then a scatter volley here, for example. And then you could also run like a turret or something in the back, which would then profit from the scatter volley if you wanted to. So there are, for example, options. You could even run, like, if you don't use sub-special warheads, you could then have a torpedo spread here and a fire at will and a scatter volley and make full use out of Entwined Tactical Matrices if you wanted to. So plenty of options to build this differently. I have a tactical team on here, which is still a good survival skill, especially with the addition shield hardness, because it just automatically redistributes your shield and makes sure that they don't just burn through your front facing. However, as I said, there are other options there. If there is another pilot skill that you prefer, you could go for that. I'm running gravity well, scramble sensors, and tractor beam as well, gravity well, because gravity well is just amazing, and the tractor beam and the scramble sensors are just uncon triggers. I have turbulence for an uncon trigger, and I have a hazard emitter. This is also where you could do something different. You could, for example, make this engineering, just use 2 emergency power 1s and then throw in another intelligence ability if you wanted. Maybe even make the unconic turbulence higher there. See, this build definitely has some options for personalization, right? But this is just a very fun build overall that I can recommend. And now I'm gonna showcase it to you in a patrol. Into Agala we go. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna showcase you without like firing everything. Just the beauty of the torpedoes and the high yields. There will always be like skeptics out there because let's just say command has been such a staple for a long time for torpedo builds that people just really gotten used to it. But you know, it's a new world out there. You don't really need that. So what we're going to do is we are going to get a little bit closer here. I'm going to fire only the fleet network, and now let's just fire the guns. And you see the stream of torpedoes that's just coming out there. Now I had a little bit of a hiccup where one torpedo didn't, where fleet officers didn't proc, but for the most part, it's just, oh, I lost my target. For the most part, it's just a steady stream. I suppose, you know, with procs you could get unlucky and not get a proc, but just look at this, right? You essentially, it's just a stream of torpedoes. And this was just me, like I didn't really press anything other than like the fleet power network array and my emergency powers. And now I'm actually gonna press buttons. How about that? Now we're actually going to press buttons. And look at that drawing. I only have one high yield with me, and yet you can see multiple isolated clears forming. Those are all from the fleet power network, right? And I think like it also like visually it looks pretty cool. Because you have like, what's in here, right? You have like the dual beam bank, which shoots you out of sort of like the cannon ports. You have the hexa cannons, which obviously look amazing. And then you have the power Omni doing some weird space wizard things. Of course, you know, the power Omni is the one that's not looking the most natural. You don't need a power Omni. It's obviously a very strong item to equip, but it's not like you necessarily need that. If you don't like the looks, you could also just run, or like the cutting beam, I suppose. You could run 2 turrets in the back if you prefer those looks. And as I've said, you could like easily throw in like an entwined tactical matrices to add some spreads then.
I'm taking you with me.
But except for the one cycle where I didn't have like a lot of torpedo proc luck, you can essentially see there is just a nice steady stream of torpedoes firing at the enemies. And there isn't really much reason for a command. I'm not saying command is bad, I'm just saying you don't need it, right?
We'll send over a pacification party, take the suspect into custody.
So, this is my weird little build. It's a fun build, right? It's maybe not going to revolutionize Star Trek Online, but it's something that I can recommend you to try out, especially if you enjoy trying out some new things and you have the necessary gear lying around. It's definitely a very good build. I've reached with a similar build. What is it? I think 900k was the best that I did. And keep in mind, I'm not the greatest pilot, right? So 900k might not sound a lot to the DPS community, but this is definitely a build that can do any elite content in the game very effective. Even if you don't have your endeavors all maxed, and even if you aren't the best pilot. And it's just fun and a joy, so maybe give it a go. Or make it your own. Yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.